I'm super excited to introduce this next panel of speakers. We've got Garrett, VP of Sales Engineering at Guardicore, and Jeff, Manager of Solution Engineering at Procore, here to talk about things they wish they knew about management before they stepped into the role. Combined, these two have over 11 years of experience in the SE world, so I think they have a lot to teach us, and I think this content is going to be really insightful, especially for those of you who are preparing to step into a leadership role or have just taken on the role. So Jeff and Garrett, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Courtney. Hello, everyone. In case you can't tell from the pictures there, I'm Jeff Sheeman. I'm the one who works at Procore Technologies. Been in pre-sales for 4 years. Been in a leadership role for just over a year, about a year and a half I'm coming up on. Garrett, I'll let you do a short intro as well.
Yeah, Garrett Weber with Guardicore. Been in pre-sales 7 years, been in leadership for three and a half, building out the SE team here at Guardicore, and happy to talk to everyone today.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and jump into the agenda here. I'll preface this with, one of the really neat things is Garrett and I, we're in completely different industries that we're selling into. And when we got together to brainstorm topics, we found that even though we're from such different backgrounds, we just found so much common ground in the things that we are, struggling with, the things that we're doing well. And so we did find 2 topics that we found a ton of common ground on. And we're hoping that, no matter where you are in your career journey or your company maturation, hoping they resonate with you and your team. And so the 2 topics that we're going to be talking about is, first, we're going to be talking about being a data-driven manager. I know a lot of us, if we're in an individual contributor capacity, we think about, all right, I've got my revenue targets, maybe I've got my pipeline, but there's a lot more to it. And we just want to highlight that here with the group. And then the next thing we'll talk about is really partnering both up, down, and across the organization. So making sure that you're not just thinking about, managing your direct reports, but also managing up and managing across. And we'll be giving some examples with those as well as we go through. So first, we'll start with the data-driven aspect here. And I'll kind of start with, what does it mean? Let's take a step back and really define what it means to be a data-driven manager. And essentially what it means in short is you use data, and specifically the correct data, to make business decisions. And I'm sure you're wondering why, why do this? And I'll actually hand it off to Garrett to talk a little bit about the why behind this.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. So first, you want to be able to run your pre-sales team like a business. And in order to do that, you need to embrace the use of data for decision-making. This way, you'll be making better informed decisions that you can justify up, down, and across the organization. So if you want to add new headcount or recommend a change to your management, data points will be expected. Businesses do not make changes based on someone's instinct. So you'll need to have those data points to back up those instincts that you have. Second, using the data will help you understand your team's strengths and weaknesses. To an extent, you need to learn how to interpret the data in order to find those strengths and weaknesses, but collecting it and using it is the first step to getting there. So for example, are you better at driving deals forward when the lead source comes from marketing or from channel partners? Or are there specific business outcomes that are use cases that you have a higher close rate on? You'll want to understand those things so you can predict what good looks like, and understand success for your team. So some of the data points we track at Guardicore are focused around the number of opportunities, the conversion rates in the funnel, and POC durations, because we're a heavy POC-driven sales process. These data points help us understand how quickly an opportunity is going to move through the funnel and project how many POCs will end up running. Understanding that duration of the POC allows us to do some capacity planning and project an SE's workload quarter over quarter. So if conversion rates increase and POC duration stays level, that tells me I may have a capacity problem in the future and we may need to add headcount. And that's a great problem for me to have, obviously. If everything I just said there is a little bit Greek and gibberish to anyone, that's okay. I think I recommend talking to your manager or a mentor and understanding what are the data points that are relevant for your organization, because they're going to vary depending on your business, your vertical, who your customers are. So Jeff, what are some of the data points you track at Procore?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I first want to call out that for all the points that you brought up, yes and yes. I mentioned Garrett and I got together and chatted about some things, and him talking about how they track POC duration per SE. That's really interesting to me. I mean, why wouldn't you want to know which one of your solution engineers are accelerating sales cycles, taking the things that they're doing well and sharing with the rest of the team? So yes and yes to everything that Garrett just shared. A few of the data points that we collect here at Procore outside of that, I mean, first and foremost is, I really like looking at historical win rate to be a leading indicator of future success. And so looking at win rate across the last few quarters is, as much as possible is helpful. Looking at pipeline with close date of the next quarter and using those two metrics to really look at, hey, do you have the pipeline in place to be successful? And really, I like to do this as a manager, but I would empower everyone who is an individual contributor to do this sort of data analysis as well. This is only going to help you be more successful, and showing that you're thinking in this kind of data-driven standpoint is really going to help you advance in your career. Big one for us at Procore too is attach rate. So Garrett and I were chatting, his business is a little bit different in that they attach to every single opportunity. At Procore, we don't attach to every single one. Some are, pure volume upgrades. We also have some pretty product proficient account executives. But we really want to understand from SMB to mid, all the way up to strategic, are we attaching to the right amount of opportunities that we forecasted for when we were planning our headcount? If you're wondering why, Jeff, why do you care how many deals you're attaching to? Deals with SEs on them historically are going to close at 2x the rate than without. We have the data to support it. I think it's about 25% close rate without, 50% close rate with. Imagine bringing that statistic to your sales leaders or sales ops when you're trying to justify headcount instead of saying, I think we need another solutions engineer. So really, really helpful to have those kind of data points with things like attach rates. At Procore, as we've grown and matured, we also have an acceleration team. We have a team of product overlays. We have a value team that helps prospects realize the value that they're going to receive by bringing on Procore. And we also like to track our attach rate with those folks as well. And the why there is the same. When we bring on our product overlays, when we bring on our value team, when we bring on our competitive team, we win more and we win together. I also like to collect data just from a feedback, standpoint on my team. So sending out surveys to our account executive partners that we work with, and really trying to understand things like, how is our value selling? How is our discovery? How is our industry knowledge, our product knowledge? How is our professionalism? How are we following up with our customers? And by having data to steer those feedback conversations, you're removing objectivity from it. And you're saying, hey, relative to your peers, you are, above average or below average. So those are just a few more that we track at Procore. I know some folks might have some questions on where do we get this data? And so, Garrett, I think you can probably take this section regarding where we actually get that data.
Sure. So for us, it comes from our CRM, which in our case is Salesforce. And I work with our sales operations team who handles the kind of business analytics side of things to make sure we're able to collect and report on the right data points. If you're a new manager, I think it's a great opportunity to start looking at this with a fresh set of eyes and look at the data for other points that may be relevant to your business that people haven't addressed before. And one thing really important to remember is the CRM, it'll give you the data. It'll give you a lot of data. interpreting the data can be more difficult and sometimes requires you to work with other sales managers, sales teams directly, other partners of the organization to actually understand what you're looking at. But the CRM is probably going to be your source of truth for that data.
Absolutely. So I guess just keeping an eye on the clock here as we prepare to go to the next topic here, if I could define a takeaway for everyone, no matter where you are, from individual contributor, aspirations of leadership, or maybe just the slightest interest, I guess our takeaway would be it's not too early to start thinking about the way that data can help you drive more effective decisions. Ask your manager to share the way that they use data to make business decisions. Start learning to flex that muscle. It's never too early to start doing that. But moving to our next topic here, which is all about managing both down, up, and across the business. And we really broke this into 3 sections. One around, preparing for feedback conversations with your directs. One about managing your manager, which is kind of a funny phrase, but we'll kind of explain that. And then partnering with other parts of the org. And I think the big reasons here of why we would do this, and then we'll kind of go into each one, is really we want to market ourselves and our team to the org. We want to share how we can help. We also want to create transparency into what we're working on. And so kind of taking this piece by piece and starting with preparing for those feedback conversations. Garrett, do you want to kick us off, and then I can share some thoughts as well?
Sure. So all individual contributors, everyone listening to this has probably said that you want more feedback, or you want feedback as often as possible. So as a new leader, now's your chance to start providing that feedback and making that part of your management persona. So give both positive and negative feedback as often as possible. That sounds obvious, but we tend to focus feedback on the negative side too often. It's harder now to give feedback, to be honest, in this virtual world. I have found it very challenging because I've lost that time after a meeting when you're outside the building talking about how it went, or when you go get a coffee and you sit down and discuss it. We've lost that a little bit. So you really need to put in the effort to make sure you're giving feedback often. One mistake is making your one-on-ones feedback-driven discussions. Don't do that. Make feedback part of your normal interactions and allow your one-on-ones to be times to actually get feedback from what your team needs, not give feedback. Make the feedback loop kind of continuous for you. You're going to have to give negative feedback. It's going to happen. It's an uncomfortable thing to do a lot of the times, but one way to set it up is to ask and say, can I give you some feedback? Or I have some feedback for you if you want it. People will almost always say yes when you propose it as a question. And what you've done is you've set it up for active listening and open discussion instead of blurting something out and just creating a tense situation between you and that other person. Giving feedback is something that is very hard to do. Jeff, what are your thoughts around feedback and the work that goes behind it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, going back to the topic here of things that I wish I knew about management, I really didn't have an understanding of just how much preparation goes into these feedback conversations. I think about things like performance reviews. You have the individual do the review, you do your review. We've started doing things like leveling across, at the VP level to make sure we're objective across all of our reviews. And then preparing for those conversations. One thing that I really like to think about is don't just give feedback, but make sure you're ready to give feedback. Something that I like to do with my manager is I like to role play different scenarios with my manager, and I'll say, "Hey, you're Jeff, and I'm someone else, and here's how I think that person is going to react. How would you react to this?" And sometimes we'll take a step back and be like, "Hey, that wasn't the best reaction. Actually, let's practice some other ones." And so for things like performance reviews. Or performance conversations, for things like negative feedback, I would just be aware that there's a lot of preparation that goes into these conversations. But also be aware that you are not alone. You are not stepping into management and all of a sudden you have to have these conversations. There's preparation that goes into it. Lean on the other managerial folks in your company or in your department. Lean on your manager and really just make sure that you're prepared to give feedback in those conversations. That's kind of the way that I think about kind of managing the team. But what about managing up? What about managing your manager? It's a funny term, and Garrett, I'll let you kind of take the managing up piece of this presentation.
Yeah, I think this is a great point because even if you're an individual contributor right now, you should be managing your manager. You probably are and you don't recognize it, but you absolutely should be focused on this. The first thing to understand is that their priorities may not and probably are not always your priorities. So don't assume that they know what your team needs. In fact, approach it as assuming they don't know what your team needs and be specific about those needs. You will have to make business cases to your management and provide data points to get what you're looking for. I find that people respond better to data than to emotion. So saying, I need this prioritized because it will improve the work of the team is simply not as powerful as saying, I need this prioritized because it'll help the team take on 15% more evaluations without adding a new headcount, and we can increase our revenue by 250K. Those data points help my manager get perspective on the impact the change could make and carry that message up to their management. The other thing to do when managing your manager is sell the good work your team is doing. Highlight people specifically. This will help them with promotions and recognition in the future. Don't just assume your manager and their managers know who the high performers are. Be specific about who those people are and share those success stories. And lastly, Jeff, you said this one to me, and it's a really funny, awesome point, is your manager told you no surprises. The last thing you want from your team is to be blindsided with a surprise. So make sure you're giving your manager all the information and all the context so that they're not blindsided as well. Jeff, I think one thing people don't realize moving into these management roles is how much work goes into managing across the organization in the different departments that we work with. So do you want to share a little on that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think when folks step into leadership, you know, they've had some great leaders throughout their tenure, and they take little pieces of each one to form their leadership voice regarding managing down, and you know, maybe they're thinking about managing up. But to your point, Garrett, a lot of people do not think about managing across the organization. Making sure that you're partnering with all of the other departments outside of just the SE role. I mentioned it earlier. I'll mention it again because it's an important point. One of the most important reasons for this is we are marketing ourselves and we are marketing our team to the rest of the organization. Here is how we can help. You know, I kind of stumbled upon the SE role as well from a different industry, but one of my absolute favorite things about it is we are at the center of so many different processes and departments. It's like if an activity or a description falls into something, they're like, hey, give it to the SEs, right? I'm sure it's similar at your companies. If you think about it, we work with CS, we work with products, sales operations, we work with HR, we work with people, recruiting, product marketing, and more, engineering, you know, to add to that list. So making sure that you are creating relationships with other leaders in other departments to make sure that you're providing them visibility into what you're working on, or potentially if you have to go to an ask for them, making sure that you already have that political capital. An example of CS, I mean, obviously we want to collaborate and stay very tight on making sure we set our customers up for success, make them forever customers in a perfect world. The number one metric in a SaaS business, net retention, right? We want to protect that by partnering with CS. You know, partnering with products, making sure that we have a clear feedback loop. I'll say when I joined Procore 4 years ago, we were like, hey, we're going to build a better relationship with product. we're 4 years later. It's not done. It will never be done. It can always be better. We can always have a better relationship with our partners on the product side. Define the feedback loop. Give feedback from the field on what is resonating well with our prospective customers, and also get visibility into the product roadmap that your product team is working on. Sales, our two topics of data-driven and partnership kind of blend together. We need to be in lockstep with sales, and we need to bring them metrics. We need to bring them our ratios, our top performers, ways we can improve, et cetera, et cetera. Again, sales ops want to make sure that we have the headcount that we need, and we need to justify that headcount, to Garrett's point, not with emotion, but with data. That makes it a lot easier of a discussion. And then last but not least, let's say you get that headcount, making sure you're in lockstep with HR, people, recruiting, so that we can coordinate with these partners to make sure that we are filling that headcount. Garrett, did I miss anything there before we shift to closing thoughts?
You made a point I want to elaborate on, and it's the political capital point. So this may be selfish of me, but focus on partnering with other groups to earn yourself some political capital for a later date. So if marketing needs help with videos, or product needs help with customer feedback, help them. Be the leaders and the managers that get involved and help them, because a day is going to come that you need marketing to produce some collateral for your champion in a deal, or you need product to speed up the delivery of something. And having that political capital for a later date will absolutely help you. People remember the good things you do to help them, and they want to reciprocate and return those favors. So be the leader that is willing to stretch a little and help the other parts of your organization.
Absolutely. So Garrett and I just wanted to end the conversation with some closing thoughts, or just some things to think about, because I know there's people on this call from all walks of where you are in the pre-sales journey. Maybe you are interested in pre-sales. Maybe you just got started in pre-sales. Maybe you just got started in leadership, or maybe you're very tenured and you're hoping to pick up some things. And so really speaking to people for the folks that are interested, I just wanted to share one of the things that I didn't know about coming into management is just how gratifying it would be. I knew that my fulfillment center when I was an individual contributor was being a buddy to people, being a mentor, watching them succeed. But stepping into a leadership role and being able to see the full life cycle of folks that go from you interview and you hire them, you help ramp them, and then you see them, get promoted and start to, beat records and beat your old records. That is such a gratifying feeling. And if you feel that is your fulfillment center as well, I highly, highly encourage you to continue on that path. Leverage the advice from the last conversation regarding owning your career, building an individual development plan, having your manager hold you accountable to that. Because I can promise you, if you're similar to me, it is an extremely, extremely gratifying feeling to being in this position.
All right. My final thought for everyone is you're going to have to learn a lot of new skills when you become a pre-sales leader. But remember to stay true to your roots of being a pre-sales engineer and what made you a great engineer to begin with. Stay close to the product and don't ask your team to do anything that you wouldn't do. So that means be able to demo, be able to do the pitch on a whim, attend the competitive training sessions, and continue to lead from the front. Your team will respect you more and you'll add more value to them this way.
Well said, Garrett and Jeff. The session's been great, and I love actually how much it's tied into the previous one. Owning your career and being equal partner in your own development alongside your leader is so important. And it actually will make you much easier to have as a direct report too, if you're very clear with what you want and bubble that up to your leaders so they can help you get there. We've got some great questions from the audience, and I'd love your perspective on a couple of them. The first one is, as a new leader stepping into a management role, either for the first time or for the first time in an organization, what's the best way to ask your leader for feedback? It's a little bit easier when you're contributing, right? You're on demos, you're on customer calls. There's a lot of interactions your manager might see you in, but it's a little different when you step into that leadership role and now you have your own team. Your leader may not see all of the work that you're doing every day. So how do you ask for and get that feedback consistently when you make that change?
I'll go ahead and start the one off. Gardacore itself is a startup, so we're a relatively small, flat organization right now. My boss is our SVP of sales for North America, who is extremely busy. So in my world, I make a point of asking for feedback and making sure he knows I want the feedback often. We use Slack. I'm comfortable with him giving me feedback in a Slack message. It doesn't always need to be a conversation between he and I, as long as I'm getting the feedback on what I could have done better. But the way I approached it was actually asking him for the feedback. And I did kind of have to make a point of foot stomping and asking for it again and again until I got him into the habit of giving me feedback freely. So it did take a little bit of effort because he's got a million other priorities and feedback slips first most of the time. So I did have to push for it a bit on my side because we're always moving so fast.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think it really it ties in with managing up. You know, you're not just creating visibility into the things that you're working on. You're also asking for some feedback on what you've done so far and some guidance moving forward. It's, hey, these are the things that I'm working on with my team. These are the roadblocks I'm hitting. How am I doing so far? How am I comparing across the org with different managers? You need to solicit feedback. Feedback is a gift. You need to give it, and you need to ask for it as much as possible. Few other things. I mean, I think if you're a relatively new company and you don't have a cadence of performance reviews, would highly recommend that. We do twice a year. I feel that those are very open, candid conversations. Something about them, you come into them and you're just ready to give and receive feedback. So I always walk out of those with a few action items. And then also just getting into a cadence in your one-on-ones with asking for feedback on the things that you're working with. Those are some of the things that came to mind.
Yeah, I love that point, especially around making space in the one-on-one. Even if the feedback isn't delivered directly in the one-on-one, just making space for, hi, I had this interaction, or I put together this asset. Can you take a look at it and give me some feedback? As a leader, that's still important to do. As a contributor, it's still important to do. Owning your career and bubbling up the things that you want feedback on is really important. I think we have time for one more question. I'd love to hear from you both on how to manage up when reporting into a leader that's a little bit more passive or laissez-faire.
Yeah, I can start. I would say that the number one thing, it's kind of a similar answer as the last one, is you need to set time for a one-on-one. And if your manager is very busy or more hands-off, it needs to be your ask to say, I would like to have a regular scheduled one-on-one with you. I am going to be the driver of the agenda. I am going to be responsible for everything on there. And I think hopefully once your manager sees the preparation that you're putting into that and the request for feedback in that one-on-one time together, that would be my number one recommendation, is make sure you get time on the calendar, make sure it's a regular cadence, make sure you're doing your preparation beforehand. And then one other thing I'll add that's somewhat related is also ask for the top 3 things that they're working on. Try to get visibility into the top 3 things that are keeping them up at night. Again, referencing back to the last conversation, another great way to get promoted, solve your manager's problems. So that's another great thing, just to get visibility into what they're working on as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think it comes down to communication. The passive manager seems like they're great because they're letting you loose and they're letting you do your own thing and they're not micromanaging you. That feels great, but you need to communicate that you need that feedback and just be proactive about it to make sure that it happens in the end. You have to own it a little bit yourself if you're not getting it directly.
Love all of that advice, especially driving the one-on-one agenda, being deliberate about making the space for and asking for feedback if you're not getting it, and just keep beating that drum. Thank you both so much. This was an incredible session. There's been great conversation on Slack, so check that out afterwards.